Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today, and before I get started, I need to mention this. I'd like to thank Jimmy over at Bright Insight. He made this follow-up video to my pyramid cover-up video I made about a week ago, and it's an excellent video. He mentioned some things in here that I did not mention, and he gave me a good shout-out, and I really appreciate that. Because between Friday and today, I think I've gained 6,000 subscribers. So I think it took me like 5 years to get my first 6,000 subscribers, and I got the last 6,000 in about 48 hours. So huge shout out to Jimmy. Thank you very much. And anybody who, well, apparently there isn't very many people that are unaware of Jimmy's channel by the look of the sub count. But if you haven't seen Jimmy's video, he dives into some very good subjects. So go check him out. As you can hear, my phone hasn't stopped beeping since Jimmy made that video with new subscriber notifications. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Jimmy. But once again, very grateful. But we're going to go look at something today. And my new subscribers, I might as well just say this. Why do I make videos? Well, I think the history that we have been sold is just incomplete. And I just think there are things that need to be said. And I believe there was a civilization existing in what we call Egypt today a long, long time ago. And I have credited some of the ruins to that time period. But I just like to say this. And that's probably the most important thing I've learned. Looking into ancient history is that the last 6,000 years isn't the birth of civilization or the beginning of civilization, is just the latest go around. So I just wanted to say that, and I have stated that some of the ruins in Egypt I don't think are Egyptian. But let me say this, and I don't want people to misunderstand me. The ancient Egyptians created some unbelievable monuments and temples. And part of my channel, I have just tried to be as thorough as possible, look at as many different places in Egypt, and even if I don't talk, just to give you a little look around to some music. But I also have tried to introduce you to some people of ancient Egypt, and I don't think enough channels do that. We are fully aware of the monuments, but today we're going to go take a look at a couple based on a tomb that comes from the Theban necropolis down in this area, and it is the Tomb of Sennefer. I believe it is labeled TT96, and it is somewhere in this area. But we are going to go take a look. And here is the entrance to the tomb and the 18th dynasty tomb builders just outside of ancient Thebes. We're very good at going through rock. It's very impressive what they got done. These aren't perfectly, cut walls here, but certainly they can get it done, cutting through the rock. And if we just go up to here, this is a diagram of what the antechamber and the burial chamber looks like. And you notice here 4 pillars, and in my Jed column and Orion video from a couple months ago, I went over how the place of the 4 pillars is very important and it relates to the Great Pyramid. Well, here the tradition carried on, and the 4 pillars is the place where you become an imperishable spirit, according to, I think it's chapter 217 of the Book of Coming Forth by Day, also known as the Book of the Dead. I just wanted to mention that. And here is a pic, kind of what you're greeted with. I know it's not a full-page pic, but it gives you an idea of the incredible artwork and the geometric designs on the ceiling here. I think that's pretty cool. Now here is some artwork from the Tomb of Sennefer, and this is his wife. And she is referred to in about 4 different ways in this tomb. And in his burial tomb, I believe she's referred to as Merit. And she also has names such as Sennefer and a few other similar variations. And some people have theorized that this guy had like 4 different wives. And there is some confusion, but I think it is just one wife. And the Merit name in the burial chamber, I think that just is a form of calling her the beloved. So I think he was just married to one wife. And he had a lot of responsibilities. He was the mayor of Thebes. That is his main title. So obviously, what we know as Luxor today a very important city in ancient Egypt. This guy was the mayor of ancient Thebes, so he had a very huge responsibility in that regards, and he was also in charge of the administration of the city, the ports on the Nile, the collection of taxes on grains and other goods and commodities. And one of the things he must have been really good at, or regarded for, or remembered for, was his upkeep for Amun's temples and granaries, cattle's fields, and especially the gardens and orchards, because that is reflected in his tomb. And when it's reflected in your tomb, this is really important. It's something that you are really remembered for in your, what you accomplished in your life. His other titles included Chancellor to Amenhotep II, the Pharaoh, the mighty Pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, or one of them, the Overseer of the granaries of Amen, and I think the Overseer of the fields of Amen, it's referred to in this tomb. And he had interactions through his wife's family, also with priests of the Pharaoh. Now here is a statue of Sennefer and his wife. We will just call her Merit, because that is what Sennefer wants her to be referred to if that's in his burial chamber. And it's just a way of calling her his beloved. And they were obviously a power couple. She had a title, I believe, of a royal wet nurse. And here is their daughter, Mutuyu. I think that is her name. And obviously, these two were a good-looking couple. He was mayor of Thebes. They were connected to the Pharaoh. And, man, looks like he's sporting a six-pack. It looks like she's a pretty well-put-together, shapely woman. So, obviously, they had it all going on, it appears to me. That is just an unbiased opinion. But moving on here. Now here is a look at some of those columns. I believe there's 4 columns, and I believe up here those are papyrus columns. So that refers to chapter 217 of the Book of Coming Forth, where the place where you become an imperishable spirit is the place of the 4 columns. And here you see the incredible artwork in here. And you notice the ceilings are not perfectly, flat. They are undulating, and there's a purpose for that, I think, that was put in by the builders, and I'll talk about that in a second. But here you see the artwork. Obviously, these two loved each other very much. All the artwork here is very affectionate, very reflective of their life, I'm sure. And here, just as in all important tombs, you have Anubis perched on a box or an ark, it is described. But in King Tut's tomb, the only intact tomb coming from a pharaoh, it tells us what this is. It's called the box coffin of Orion. And that's why the ancient Anubis statue was guarding the pyramids, symbolized as the house of Osiris, in the configuration of Orion. That totally makes sense. And in the only intact pharaoh's tomb, it says Anubis is sitting on the box coffin of Orion. And in this tomb, chapter 151 of the Book of Coming Forth by Day is transcribed on the walls, and it starts out with Anubis, saying that his hands are upon the imperishable spirit, and that is also translated as Sahu or Orion. That's how that book, chapter 151 of the Book of Coming Forth by Day, that is inscribed on the walls, and it's all about Anubis. And people say, well, the Sphinx originally was a lion. Well, there is no lion in any important tomb. The most important statue in the world, why isn't it in any important tomb? Well, that statue is. It's in all the important tombs. It's in the form of Anubis, sitting on the box coffin of Orion, and that fits perfectly with what we see at Giza, because, he is down in a pit. We know from these drawings that were done about 200 years ago that it appears what we call the Sphinx today is perched up on something, perfectly representative of a coffin. If he's in a pit and perched up here, the dual meaning, just as many things coming from ancient times in Egypt, or what we call Egypt today, they had double meanings. So I think this is double symbolism coming from the ancient Anubis statue, which the ancient Egyptians identify in the Book of Coming Forth by Day by calling it the Temple of Tep-2F, which translates as the Temple of Anubis on his hill. And here is some of the artwork. This is Merit and Sennefer paying homage to Osiris and Anubis. And also on this wall is transcribed a sacred pilgrimage to Abydos. And I think there's a reason for that, because the temple right in front of what we call the Sphinx today, the ancient Anubis statue, what they call the Valley Temple, is identical to the Osirian, which in ancient times is described as the Tomb of Osiris. So I think the Tomb of Osiris at Abydos, the Osirian, and the Valley Temple in front of the ancient Anubis statue, it's all intertwined in the sacred journey on the Nile to Abydos, and that could be reflective in their spiritual tales as a journey across the celestial Nile, the Milky Way. Just want to throw that in there. Now here is some artwork in the tomb of Sennefer, and here is him and his wife, and this is all about the sacred pilgrimage down to Abydos, and I think that is directly connected to the Osirian. Now here is a photograph from the early 1900s, and this just shows the inside of the tomb. I know it's not in color, but you get an idea of how the Egyptians did it. Really, there is no part of one of these four columns or the ceiling or anywhere that wasn't left undecorated. That's just the way the Egyptians did it. Now here is another depiction, and this is a priest, and he is wearing a leopard skin garment here, which I find that very unique. But here he is, I think he is cleansing Sennefer and his wife, and I believe this is called what is referred to as a Nemset jar, and these are just cleansing waters that like purify the soul of Sennefer and his wife. I think that is what that depicts. And where the tomb ceiling isn't decorated with specific things, we have this geometrical design. And here there is some text running down the middle of it. But I just find that very cool. It looks very 1967-ish. Now here in this scene, Sennefer and his wife are just kind of lounging, kicking back. And then they're rising and standing. And they are depicted here as outside for a reason, and it says on the wall here, they go and either see or view the solar disk, and there are just many scenes from their life that are tied into their spirituality that is depicted in their tomb, and this is what they're doing here. They are viewing the solar disk. And here is the ceiling of Sennefer's tomb, and he was in charge of the temples in the gardens of Amun. And here you see how the ceiling is kind of undulating. I don't know if you can kind of see how it's not perfectly smooth. It's undulating. And I think the artist or whoever designed this tomb did this perfectly and intentionally, because these vines appear to be actually lower, and you kind of get a 3D effect. And I don't know if you can really see that well, but I think that is a fascinating thing, and it's a very highly decorated tomb. And I got another pic here. Here, some of those you can kind of see from this early photo how the walls or ceilings are a little undulating. And here is another pic of the ceiling and the grapes. I believe that is what is depicted here. But I think that is very cool. And this is exactly where this tomb got its name in the early 1900s, I believe, called Tomb of the Vineyards. And this, I believe, is a little bit of the funeral procession with some important jewelry, I guess, that would be worn by a very important deceased person. And his funeral was obviously a very big happening in ancient Thebes, and I think this just depicts part of that funeral procession and people carrying different important objects. And here is the wife Merit, and she is playing what we would call today a board game, and is called Senet. And maybe somebody can leave a link. I know there's some videos out there on what or how this game was actually played, but it's what we would call a board game today. And here is Mutu, her daughter, at her feet. I think this was just a very cool, loving family. And here is one last pic here to look at, but this gives you a good idea of the undulating ceiling and what they call the Tomb of the Vineyards. And here is Sennefer and his wife. Obviously, they love nature, and it looks like they each have a lotus flower, and it looks like Sennefer's actually taking a hit off of this lotus plant, and maybe they were partying like it was 1439 BC. But that is a good look around. And by the way, I just wanted to mention this, and this is for my new subscribers, and I've mentioned this before. People have asked me for my credentials. What authority do you have to talk about ancient Egypt? Have you ever been there? Well, no, I'm not affiliated with any group. I'm not a scholar. I can't, I don't have to toe the bogus company line that groups have been giving you as far as the ancient history and the complete picture. Egyptologists, some of them that I have mentioned, that I criticize, also are very knowledgeable of ancient Egypt, and ancient Egypt was fully capable of incredible things. But I think Egyptologists have been handed a 20-page story, and they only look at like the last 12 or 13 chapters. They totally disregard maybe the first third of the book. And I think there's a totally incomplete chapter that needs to be told, or at least brought forward, at least with possibilities. And I'm glad I'm not affiliated with anybody. I can read. I have common sense. And history is nothing but an open suggestion box, and I'm just putting my envelope in the slot. So that answers your question about my credentials. I don't have any, thank goodness. And that was a look at Sennefer, a little introduction to his family, person who lived about 3,400 years ago in ancient Thebes, present-day Luxor. And to all my new subscribers, welcome aboard. Hope you all thought that was interesting, and you all have a very nice day.